So I am going to try and do this talk in 20 minutes. And I only want you to really remember two things. As technology becomes ubiquitous, humans are actually the most important thing, not the technology. And so we're going to talk a little bit about human kindness. But the other thing we're going to talk about is if you want to start a billion-dollar company, you better get your core values right. You better ensure that as you start a company, if you want to make a change in the world, embed it throughout your entire company. Don't just hire a CSR person and put them in the corner of the room and tell everybody, oh, we're helping the world. You have to really infuse it in your business. So I work for a company called Airbnb. Does anyone know what that is? Okay, a couple of people. So does anyone know the origin story? Two guys, designers, realized there was a design conference on, just like this, and they couldn't afford to go to the design conference. Actually, they couldn't even afford their rent, and they were about to get kicked out. But one of the guys, Joe, had an air mattress, and he said, well, what if we make a website called Air Bed and Breakfast? We inflate 3 air mattresses, and we offer ham and cheese croissant. Now, this is in America, and if anyone's had a ham and cheese croissant in America, you know how bad it is. So they did this for 25 bucks, and they raised enough money so they could actually attend the conference. And while they sat there during the conference, listened to these big-name designers, they realized the thing that they got most out of that whole week was a website and a business idea. Fast forward 10 years, and this is what Airbnb looks like. Now, as a company, we've grown huge. So to give you a sense, there's now 4.85 million properties on Airbnb around the world. And approximately 300 million guests have stayed on Airbnb over the last few years. We're in 88,000 cities and in 192 countries now. I also want to note that a lot of people don't realize that actually a lot of our hosts are actually female. 55% of our hosts are female, and they've earned approximately $10 billion. Here in Austria, female hosts earned 40 million euros last year. And you should stay for the Women 2.0 talk later, because the future is going to be female. So what about the mission? When Airbnb's founders started their company, most people, they start a company with a mission which is like, we want to disrupt the accommodation space, or we want to be the leader in the cell phone industry. Airbnb's mission was very different. It was, we want to create a world where anyone can belong anywhere, and we're going to use travel to do it. And so they embedded what would be your CSR as their core mission. And as we've grown as a company, everybody in the company instills that in what they do. So when we decided to start an innovation lab, most tech companies, when they do an innovation lab, they're like, how do we make our widget faster, better, redder? When we looked at the core values of our company, when we wanted to innovate, we want to innovate connection. How do we create face-to-face connection? How do humans actually meet, cherish the time they have together? Because that's the most important part of being a human, is connecting with others. And quite frankly now, like, this is what we do to each other. I mean, in San Francisco, people go on dates where you're sitting across from someone and you're texting your friends how the date is going, and they're giving you live feedback about whether you should go to the next level. So it's become insane. So we decided if we're going to do an innovation lab, let's focus on human potential and how do we create tools for exponential generosity amongst our community and the community beyond Airbnb. So we do this by 4 simple ways, which is extending belonging, which means we know what it's like to belong somewhere, but how do we extend that beyond people that may not have the means or even the ability to travel to really connect on a much deeper level? How do we design inclusively? Often, a lot of companies say, we design with our communities. They don't really design. They show up, they do a PowerPoint presentation, they tell the community what's going to happen, and they leave. We have to design and develop the entire process with that community and figure out how do we move forward and how do we work together so that they own that process. Building at scale, and creating acceptance. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the last few years, there's been division amongst us. There's been a heightened awareness and fracturing of society. Certainly where I'm from, we have an interesting president who has interesting things to say and should have his own 9gag account. So extending belonging is just not beyond our community, it's inside. So last month, our employees did about 11,000 hours of volunteer work, about 250 projects in 50 cities around the world. But we've also galvanized our hosts to take part in that kind of volunteer activity to help build and work in the community. Designing inclusively, I already said, like, how do we design with communities? And I've been very fortunate for the last 20 years. That's been some of the work that I've been doing and bringing that to Airbnb to kind of galvanize the process. And building at scale. We're a tool that builds at scale. 10 years ago, 2 guys spent a few hours to build a website, and a decade later, they have the largest accommodation platform on the planet. So how do we build social good at scale? And then designing for trust. You know, the concept of Airbnb is totally fucked. I mean, seriously, somebody said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take photographs of your toilet and your bed, and we're going to put it on the internet. People are going to look at it, and they're going to pay you to sleep there. That idea is nuts. But now it's the new normal. You're like, that's a really good-looking toilet and a fantastic bed. I am going to stay there. So what's happened over the last decade is we've designed trust into the process, so you actually trust the relationship with the person you're staying with, and you're okay having someone stay in your house. I do this every summer. I spend my summer in Europe, and some stranger lives in my house for 6 weeks. And then we build a team that reflects the community. Often in the tech world, you know, tech teams look a very particular type, but we actually brought together a whole group of people that are not just coders and designers, but people that are community organizers, humanitarians, just doers, people that do. But let's talk about the projects, because that's the most important. So our largest project today is called Open Homes. And it was based under a very simple premise by Joe Gebbia, one of our founders, who said that inspired by our host generosity, we create a tool where more hosts can help more people in need. They open their homes, their doors, their hearts to those that are seeking refuge, safety, and belonging. That means, could we allow people to open up their homes for anyone who needs it? And this isn't a new idea, but we haven't told this story. Nobody knows we've been working on this for years. So in 2012, there was a hurricane that hit New York City. And one of our hosts went on Twitter and said, look, I don't want to charge anyone to stay in my place. Can I just have them stay there for free? Our website wasn't coded to do that. So very rapidly, we responded. Some engineers hacked the system, and we allowed Shell to be able to host families who were displaced by the hurricane in New York. Fast forward 5, 6 years, we've now responded to over 250 disasters, both man-made and natural. There's about 7,500 homes that are open for people around the world. Also, medical-related needs. Say that there's somebody who needs to come to Graz or Vienna for medical treatment, and they don't want to stay in a hotel. Maybe they have chemo, and they actually want to stay with someone who's gone through the process. We have a whole bunch of people that have signed up to say, look, I've gone through this very difficult stage, and I want to open up my home to somebody who's going to the nearby hospital so that they can feel kind of the love and warmth of somebody who understands. So we've built this very simple. We look at those who are in need. We partner with agencies, whether it's international or very local agencies, and we have hosts who are willing to open up their homes. And it's not just for natural disasters anymore. We've been working with refugees, with migrants, with evacuees, with homeless communities, and it goes on and on and on. And why are we focused on it? So Airbnb is not looking to be the next company that grows in the next year or 5 years or 10 years. We're looking at a 100-year horizon. And if we're looking at a 100-year horizon, what's the 100-year problems? Now, when I started working with refugees, there were about 20 million people displaced. I was young, eager. I thought we could crack this. I spent 15 years working on refugee issues. And this number that came out in 2017 proved that I failed. I completely failed. Because not only did we not make a dent in those who are displaced, it actually tripled, almost tripled now. But the reality is because of resource scarcity, climate change, and internal conflict, over 325 million people will be displaced by 2047, which means you have 30 years to try and deal with this crisis. So why not create the solutions now for tomorrow's challenges? The other thing that people don't realize is they see photographs on the news of refugee camps. That's only one stage in the process. And for many refugees, it takes 17 years to go from displacement to resettlement. And there's an entire journey that takes place. So as a group, we've begun looking at what are the pain points in that entire process, and how can we play a role, and how can our community play a role? So not just better shelter, but integration into the communities, working on livelihoods. Then there was the tweet. So we had a very small team of about 3 people. We have a very strong, opinionated team of founders, and they use Twitter, much like the president. And the president of the United States put out a tweet basically saying that he was going to ban all Muslims from entering the country and that he was going to put a travel ban in place, effective immediately. I happened to be enjoying my Saturday, and I looked on Twitter to find that my CEO had put this tweet out there that said, Airbnb is providing free housing to refugees and anyone not allowed in the US. Stay tuned for more. Contact me if urgent need for housing. And then the next tweet, he posted his email address. It got retweeted 200,000 times. And so we realized we were onto something. And so we did, when the Super Bowl happened, we decided to take action. So for a company whose core values is that anyone can belong anywhere, we couldn't just sit in the sidelines and say, well, this isn't an issue we care about or not care about. We decided to put our feet straight in. We said, look, we're going to create a mechanism that will allow anybody in the world to host. You don't even have to be an Airbnb host. You could sign up your own home, and you can say who you want to host. The most amazing thing about this, we aired this during the Super Bowl. Super Bowl. We did this 2 days before the game. We made the ad, we put it up, and it aired for 30 seconds during the second quarter. Over 12,000 people signed up to open up their homes for people in need. Most amazing, a huge majority from Europe. I don't know why you're watching the Super Bowl, but apparently you care about the needs of refugees and displaced people. So we made a commitment that for the next 5 years, we're going to figure out a way to provide housing for 100,000 people through short-term housing. And we're working on a number of initiatives. We built a website. It's just airbnb.com/openhomes. And you can learn about a number of those who've been displaced that have found shelter, as well as those who are open home hosts who have opened up their homes. And it's fairly simple. That's Susan. She's amazing. She's opened up her home to like 20 people so far. So you just join the community, you press a button, you list your home, and you say what cause. Maybe you care about the refugee issues, but you don't really want to have refugees in your house, but you want somebody who has medical needs. So you actually can select the cause that you really care about, and then when there's a match, we figure out how to house that person. So the impact to date, we've housed about 11,000 people. We've had 2x year-on-year growth in terms of our hosts, and about 40 countries where we've been housing people so far. We're working about 25 agencies. So I've got 5 minutes to talk about Accelerator. So most tech companies have a kind of have an impact accelerator where they come up with generate ideas that could be the next product for them. We said, well, if our common cause is about how to help humanity and humankind, we should have an accelerator program that looks at innovative solutions to a variety of issues. And so that's a program that I lead, and we have a whole bunch of pilots that we've been doing. Every quarter, we do a couple of pilots. When the travel ban happened, we realized that the issue wasn't just that refugees needed shelter, but a lot of people actually were scared of refugees and actually feared them. For the first time ever, refugees arriving in the States were more scared of Americans than Americans were scared of refugees, simply because the rhetoric around how we treat people and how we think of people had been so vitriolic. So we wanted to break that. So we decided to figure out how to do something called Supper with Us, a completely unbranded website. Nobody knew it was Airbnb. We just put up this thing that said, would you be willing to open up your home for dinner for refugees that have resettled in your area? And then we targeted the most red states in the United States, so deep Republican states who had been told that they were far right and anti-immigrant, and we saw what happened. Well, one night, 400 people got together, 93 families. They all opened up their doors. They created strong bonds with the community, and we realized that very rapidly, a one-week pilot, we could get hundreds of people to break bread together and begin to understand their differences and their similarities. And then something unexpected happened. All of those families started posting on social media. We didn't ask them. Many of them didn't even know it's Airbnb. And it went like wildfire, tens of thousands of responses. 5,000 people signed up like in one Facebook post because of this woman, Sloan. We would get emails from people explaining that, Lydia hosted her parents, and her dad actually was a big supporter and funder for the current president. And they had an Afghani family, and her father was very worried about the fact that she was going to have refugees in her house. By the end of it, he realized. And to give you context, her father had actually escaped Europe during persecution in the 40s, that the persecuted had become the persecutor. He had gone there and said, I don't want these people coming to our neighborhoods, when he himself had been displaced for the same reasons. So he had this moment of epiphany that what the heck have I been thinking about? And he wrote this letter to everyone in his community called Abdul the Mensch about, we need to rethink the way we treat people because we were once them, and we need to look at our own history. So we did it again. And a few weeks later, 3,000 people got together, and we did it globally, and we had an open source toolkit. So it was a very quick program. Experiences, I'm going to go through this very quickly. Airbnb also offers experiences online. You could learn how to do ballet. You can go cave spelunking. You can ride the Santa Monica Pier with Sarah. You could learn how to be a sumo. You can learn to DJ. And then we said, how can we work with nonprofits to raise money for them and have a really impactful experience? So we put together social impact experiences. So we've ended up raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for nonprofit organizations that have wanted to kind of host people, to give them an experience, including the prison warder of Nelson Mandela, who takes people to Robben Island and talks about what it was like to befriend Nelson Mandela. And all of the money goes to Mandela's foundation. But when you're dealing with people in need, often companies like to promote that idea that somebody is a refugee or someone's been displaced. And to me, it's almost re-victimizing someone who's gone through a really difficult situation. So we said, could we pilot this idea of building livelihoods with dignity? Amman, Jordan has doubled in the last 5 years. It's a beautiful city with such a rich culture. Iraqis have been displaced, Syrians have been displaced, Palestinians were displaced. So it's a melting pot of a lot of people that have come together for very tough reasons, but they've created a really vibrant, amazing city. I love this city. And so we said, could we create a marketplace where people could offer experiences, and regardless of what their situation they're in, we would figure out a way for them to get supplemental income. So we took the old code. No one in the company knew we were doing this. It took us 3 hours. We ripped the code down, we rechanged it, we stripped it, and we put it back up as the Amman marketplace. And we offered people a lot of different things you could do in the city. So you could learn how to belly dance, you could go on hikes, you could do photography classes, you could paint. My favorite is Taz. Taz is amazing. She's a cook. She meets you in the marketplace. You get all the vegetables, and you learn how to cook. I have no time for this, so I'm just going to keep going. Sorry. I want to note about this is when often we look at humanitarian issues, we want to embellish somebody's stories. It's not your story, it's her story. So when we look at building livelihoods programs, we shouldn't be saying, come and cook with a refugee who's had to walk all the way from Aleppo because her family were being persecuted. It's, come cook with Taz. She's amazing. She's awesome. And then we put out a little video that went viral inside Jordan. So we launched it, it grew rapidly, and actually none of the guests knew that 100% of those who were hosting were either refugees or people who were from displaced or underprivileged communities. I'm not going to show you this project because that's about 110 beats per minute, and I only work at 90. So I think we should wrap this up. Yeah? Okay. Okay, you're not going to get to see the rest, or do you want to see the rest and not the Q&A? Hands up who wants Q&A. Hands up who wants like the revitalization of rural communities around the world.
Perfect, there we go.
Okay, here we go.
Revitalization it is.
Yeah, a little lower, but keep the beat going. Okay, so Yoshino, Japan, like many countries around the world, have a rapid shrinking population. They're actually one of the most advanced communities, civilizations we've got, but they're losing 800,000 people a year, every year for the next 20 years, which means a lot of towns and villages are not only shrinking, but they're becoming abandoned. And so when we look at mass urbanization and all these people talking about smart cities are dumb. Happy cities are good cities. Just because you're technically connected doesn't make it better. What happens to the rural communities that are left behind? We've certainly seen in the United States when we leave rural communities behind, anger comes. So how do we have a much more inclusive world that includes those that are moving to the cities and those that are going to remain in rural communities? So we found ourselves in a small town called Yoshino in Nara, which was the birthplace of traditional craftsmanship over the last 800 years. And we worked with all these amazing people in the community, the guardian of the forest, woodcutters, sake makers, chopstick makers, soy sauce makers. The entire community began to ask them, what can we do to actually create somewhere where you can come together, work together, figure out the future of this village, but also host people and show them how amazing this place is. So we decided to change the model of Airbnb. Instead of having a home where there's a host and a guest, we said, what if there's a community model where you have a guest, a community center, which is also an Airbnb, and the entire village actually runs it. So we decided to build it. So you've got your Airbnb and your community center. And it's on the shores of Yoshino. You can book this tonight if you want. It's beautiful. I've stayed there many times. You have this incredible view. And when it's cherry blossom season, there's 90,000 cherry blossom trees that are rolling along the banks. It's 100% of this was made within a 5-kilometer radius of the site. It's LEED kryptonite. I don't know what that would be, but it's hyper-sustainable. It's made from all the trees surrounding in the surrounding forest, and made all by the traditional craftsmen. To our surprise, it's the world's first cooperative Airbnb. Has 70% occupancy, 3 million yen in earnings, and a surge in off-season tourism. So we've now expanded rural revitalization projects to 7 countries. I just got back from spending 2 weeks with the nomadic reindeer tribe in Mongolia, working with them to figure out sustainable housing mechanisms. And actually, right now, you could actually live with the reindeer tribe on the northern Mongolian border on Airbnb and actually supplemental income, and there's a whole project in that. As well as in Italy, where the funds actually go to revitalize the historic architecture of the community. No time for that. So I'm going to end again with a plea. You have a choice. Technology-centric humans, which is what we are now and the course that we're leading our future generations on. Or do we pivot and we figure out a mechanism where there's human-centric technology? So let's collaborate. And this is my email. Thank you.